Hello, everyone. I'm your host, Andrea Weckerly, and welcome to the Ready Living podcast, where each episode is designed to educate, inspire, and empower you to create the life you want. Thanks for joining us, and remember to subscribe for free on your favorite platform. My guest today is Esther Bergsma, a social science researcher in the field of high sensitivity, whose work has given high sensitivity a scientific and human face. She is a best-selling Dutch author, an international keynote speaker, and educator of professionals working with high-sensitive persons, HSPs. She sits on the Supervisory Board of Highly Sensitive Men and is the Director of Hoogensitief, meaning highly sensitive, a platform that enables people to learn about and embrace their own high sensitivity traits. The website contains hundreds of blog posts from different authors, including some in English. Welcome, Esther.
Thank you.
In your book, The Brain of the Highly Sensitive Person, Why You Shouldn't Judge a Fish by Its Ability to Climb a Tree, you define high sensitivity as a trait characterized by great sensitivity to stimuli, both internal and external, and both positive and negative, and the profound processing thereof. And in a recent interview, I heard you describe high sensitivity as not something that you get, it's something that you're born with. I should note that the scientific term for this trait is sensory processing sensitivity, SPS. How did you first become interested in studying the highly sensitive brain?
I guess it started with my own experience. I was a manager, first at a governmental organization and later a nonprofit organization, and I fell sick. I stayed at home and tried to get better and tried to get to work, but nothing I did worked, and all the therapists that I visited didn't know what to do with me. In that period, I read a book by Elaine Aron, and then I thought, this is about me. I'm highly sensitive, and that was such a game changer for me. Once I noticed that not only me, but also my children are highly sensitive, I made a lot of changes in our family, and it made things so much easier. And at the moment that I was able to go back to work again, I didn't go to my manager job, but I started my own company, and I really focused on highly sensitive people. But because I have a background in social science, I thought, well, there is so much we still do not know about this trait. I conducted a series of researches. I really wanted to know more about the brain and read all the science articles about it.
You just mentioned that both you and your children are highly sensitive persons. What percentage of the population falls under the HSP label?
Really big percentage. About 20% of the people is highly sensitive. So from every 5 persons that you know, one is highly sensitive. So by knowing what their trait high sensitivity is about, we can so much better help them make the best of their lives.
Yeah, and since we're talking about that, can you explain how the brain of a highly sensitive person processes information differently compared to the brain of a non-HSP person?
When you get information from your surroundings, your brain processes them, and the highly sensitive person is much more connected in his brain. So there are different parts of your brain that interact with one another. That's why you experience situations much different than a non-HSP. While a non-HSP sees something and can instantly react, HSP needs some more time because the brain is connecting all those different views with one another, all those different perspectives. That does take time and it does take energy, but it also comes with various benefits.
But I do want to touch on two things that you mentioned in your book, where you write about the pause to check system and the optimal option ambition. Can you explain these concepts and how they shape the behavior of a highly sensitive person?
The brain is more connected. The pause to check is a term by Elaine Aron. It means, well, literally take some time to make sense of what is coming through your senses in your brain. That's the reason why if school children get a question, they need some time to answer it. Or, for example, when you're in a meeting and there's a plan presented, that you need some time to think it through before you can say, that sounds good. The other one is the optimal option ambition. We know what kind of brain areas are more activated. And from that, we know that when you think about all the information coming in your brain, your prime focus is the best option for your social group that you're in at the moment. So that means that you're very attuned to other people's needs, maintaining a harmonious atmosphere, and always thinking of what's best for the group. With that in mind, you try to react in a way that you think most people please. For example, when you have a new project that is presented, you might think about what are the interests of all your colleagues and what they would like best and what kind of teams are best for them. And only at the end, you will think about what's best for me and what do I want. But that's not something that comes naturally because of that optimal option ambition. So it's the best option, not for you, but for the social group.
I'm really curious what the difference is between somebody who is merely sensitive to certain stimuli, let's say loud noises or strong tastes, and someone who is truly an HSP.
Yeah, that's a really important question because that's one of the main misunderstandings about this trait. So, a person who is sensitive to sounds can be highly sensitive, but is not per se.
One of the other things that I would imagine people tend to think is that these are all introverts. But in looking over your work and researching this topic, that's not true, is it?
No, no, it's definitely not true. A lot of people think, well, they're a bit shy, they're a bit modest. Well, there might be introverts, but we know from the early research that about a third of highly sensitive people is extroverted. There are more extroverts in the big population and a small portion in the highly sensitive population.
Well, then how do HSPs experiences differ depending on whether they are introverts or extroverts?
So, being highly sensitive is a trait. So, it's not something that is diagnosed, it's not a disease, it's just a trait. And you can have this trait amongst other traits, such as being introverted or extroverted. When you are introverted, you have a strong need to have alone time, to get new energy from being on yourself, concentrating on your inner thoughts. When you are more extroverted, you have a need of the energy in interacting with others. So when you are highly sensitive and extroverted, you want to meet other people, talk to other people, but at the same time, being in such a social context will constantly activate your optimal option ambition. So it's really tiring. So that means that on the one end, you really like interacting a lot, and the other, in an instant, can be very tired and want to withdraw. When you are an introvert and a highly sensitive person, you will make more time for yourself. It's not that you don't like social interaction, you just are more focused on your inner thoughts.
Another misconception is that HSPs are primarily women.
There are as many men that are highly sensitive as there are women. So it's a 50-50. A lot of men don't know about this trait, and that's because in the more Western societies, we have a different view on what men should be like, and also about what are the best traits you should have. So, for example, more traits like being kind, being patient, being modest, those are not very highly appraised in the Western countries. And that's a big problem because when you always suppress your sensitive nature, you will really get physical and mental complaints from that.
Presumably, you're talking about exhibiting traits like being stoic, not expressing emotions outside of perhaps anger or frustration or things like that.
Yeah, and being dominant, taking the lead, being decisive.
You mentioned that the HSP brain works overtime, and while that means it takes a lot of energy and a highly sensitive person needs to recharge sooner than a non HSP, highly sensitive people have a range of talents and skills. Can you share some of those with us?
I think it's a really important question because we tend to focus on the negative sides of being highly sensitive. But once you recognize your talents more, it's more easy to get the best from your trait. One of the advantages is that you notice and enjoy the subtle smells and colors and sounds more deeply. For example, you're more attuned to other people's needs. You make very well balanced decisions and you have a strong sense of responsibility. There are more, but these are most important. And one I want to stress is creative thinking.
HSPs are known to be very empathetic. In recent years, there has been an increasing discussion about mirror neurons and what you call the neural Wi Fi effect. Can you explain how this contributes to an HSP's deep empathy?
So the term neural Wi-Fi is from Daniel Goleman, and it's the insight from scientific research that when you look at another person, that your brain kind of mirrors what he does. So, for example, athletes that want to train their brain and might watch some images of themselves running or swimming or whatever, and the brain will respond to that, and it's kind of a training exercise. But it also counts for emotions. So when I see someone cry and I'm really attuned to that person, you will cry with them. That's because one person has stronger mirror neurons than others. And we know from recent research that this mirror neural system you can measure with EEG rays. And when you look at pictures, for example, from people that are sad or happy or just have a neutral face, that the highly sensitive people activate that mirror neural system more strongly. And they also say that they feel the emotions from the picture more strongly than the non-HSP. So the brain is really the most recognized aspect of being highly sensitive, namely really feeling for someone.
HSPs are deeply affected by the emotion, which I believe the term is called emoception. So, how can HSPs find the balance between being empathetic and at the same time protecting themselves from feeling emotionally flooded by the feelings of others?
That's the big question to get that balance. Emoception is the way that neural Wi Fi works, and you get the emotions from the other in your brain, and of course, that cascades a lot of processes in your body. One of the first things I have learned is that being aware of this process makes such a difference, because there are a lot of HSPs that don't really know that this is happening and they just feel sad in a moment or angry. It really consumes them. And once you realize that this is really a strong process in the highly sensitive brain and it's different from your friends or your colleagues, you can say, okay, what I'm now feeling is probably something I just mirrored from someone else. And that means it's not mine and I can let it go. When you say to yourself, this is not my emotion, and I let it go, you will feel it reduces in strength.
In your book, you note that HSPs are more strongly activated to do things that are beneficial for others. You touched on that a little bit earlier, and have a strong passion for helping others. In my view, that's an amazingly beautiful quality and one we need more of in the world, especially now. How can HSPs make sure to stay in touch with their own needs and their own power while working so hard to help others?
That's the optimal option ambition that I talked about. You show your brain is really attuned to other people's needs. And it's almost automatically that you notice them and want to do something for the other. It definitely is a wonderful talent. But when you're not aware that this is your standard operation from your brain, then you might realize after, 10 years of working as an employee, why am I so exhausted? It's really something every HSP should learn. Every time you make a decision, tune into what you feel and what you need and take that into the decision and weigh it equally. I will predict that those HSPs will still help a lot of other people, but hopefully will also get more balance in their life because their own needs are as important. The needs that you feel as a person are not always the same as the needs for the social group.
On social media, you wrote that, and I'm quoting here, I get emotional fast even by the smallest things. When I started reading that thing that you wrote, I thought, oh, she's going to describe needing some quiet time to recharge or something similar. But then you went on to write that experiencing a bird in the garden, the sun warming my face, a layer of ice on the pond, or the beautiful colors of the sky at the end of the day, those emotions are so intense, I feel my body relaxing and the corners of my mouth go up. I used to not give myself time to reflect, but now I use these moments to recharge. As an HSP, we often feel stress more quickly, but the nice thing is that we can also easily find relaxation in these small moments if we allow it. This is a beautiful example, Esther, of how being an HSP brings an amazing richness to a person's life.
Yeah, isn't it wonderful?
Research suggests HSPs may be more creative than non HSPs. How is this manifested?
Mostly it's in the way that we think more creative. So, for example, there has been some research about giving some words to make unique sentences with them, and the HSP score more highly on that task. And the same is with the research where you get little symbols and make a new figure from them. We are able to make more unique solutions. When our brain makes more connections, it also sees more possibilities, more perspectives, more ways to look at things. So your creativity can lead to, for example, brilliant solutions for a really difficult work problem. You see all kinds of ways to improve your surroundings. So that's a really, really great gift for an HSP, and one of my favorite, I must say.
Yeah, I love that. Creativity and problem solving.
Yeah, yeah.
I read that 60% of HSPs identify as perfectionists. In your work, you describe the link between self reflection and self criticism in HSPs. Can you explain why they are more self critical and how they can balance introspection with self compassion?
So we know about the highly sensitive brain that there are more connections, but we also know that the highly sensitive brain takes a lot of time to process and archive experiences. That's the way your brain is putting it into archive maps so that when the situation returns, you know what to do. In that process, you have that question, could I have done better? And here, what we just talked about, a really positive point, namely to see all kinds of possibilities and to think creatively. In this process, you will also see all kinds of other possibilities that you didn't choose. Your brain is constantly producing alternatives. You feel you have failed. And of course, that's an important talent to be able to grow and to improve and to learn. So, that balance for enough self compassion is so important for the HSPs. And here again, it's crucial to know that this is happening, that you're different in the way you process your experience than other people, and that all those talents are unique to you as well, and that could fuel your self compassion. But I must say, if some of our listeners are struggling with that, please find help, because this could get in the way of being their most wonderful self.
In a fast paced, highly stimulating society, especially now in the digital age where there is a never ending source of information that has a sensory and emotional impact on us, how can HSPs embrace their strengths and protect their well being while still engaging meaningfully with the world?
What I see in different age groups among HSPs is that they really look at their peers. But what you really need to know is that the way your brain works requires more energy. And when you go on in that same pace that everyone is having, you will get a burnout, something I have experienced, or other diseases because your system will be depleted. You can have a really, really meaningful life. But to do that, you need to know what circumstances and what rest times and what resources you need to keep yourself healthy. So, what we know from research is that rest is so important for us. Every day you need to rest to restore your stress level. When you do that, you will notice that you have more energy to give and that your talents will have more room to come out. And when you take the time to make a day pattern for yourself that gives you enough rest and gives you enough new energy moments, you will notice that all the things that you're good at have more space. You will love yourself better. So it's a spiral upwards.
I think that is so important what you just mentioned. Burnout is a real thing, even among non HSPs. So, being aware of the price that we pay mentally, physically, emotionally, if we are just trying to produce and produce and produce instead of take care of ourselves as well, is so important.
Yeah, I've done an international research amongst HSP in the workplace, and I also asked about getting a burnout and what you need in the workspace. And when I look at the Dutch numbers, when we look at the total working population, about 15% has had a burnout. When we only look at the HSP employees, it's more than half that has had a burnout. So it's such a big difference. But we also need to realize that we don't need to let them go into a burnout. When you master your energy level better and you know that you need to rest and to restore from your really busy brain, then you are the golden employee because you have so many talents that are important to any organization.
How can HSPs leverage their strengths, such as attention to detail and deep thinking, things that you've mentioned, in leadership and innovation?
Yeah, some people think that HSPs can't be leaders. I really disagree. Perhaps a different leader than most people think a leader should be, but when you really look at what a leader should do is enable other people to reach the goals of the organization. What we know from research is that when people feel seen, when people feel supported, they will work on their best for their organization. And what we see with HSP leaders is that they have very strong bridge building strengths, that they have a strong sense of responsibility and great awareness of social issues. And those things look at broader picture of what you want to do inside your organization and how you want to reach the world. I think there will be masters at leading any organization.
Yeah, I actually agree with you. So much research has shown that these are the things that can make the difference between a successful and an unsuccessful workplace. You touched on this a little bit earlier when we were talking about highly sensitive men, but I'm wondering if you could address how high sensitivity is perceived differently in Western versus Asian cultures.
Well, it's a different focus in different cultures. And when we look at, for example, the Asian cultures, that being modest and being kind and acting responsible are really highly praised talents. And many HSPs will see themselves reflected in those strengths. So they feel supported by their culture that they can be highly sensitive. But if you have a culture that is much more about, reactive, dominant, go for your own good, well, you think, okay, being sensitive is a negative thing. I shouldn't be like this. What we see, and I told you about the highly sensitive men, is that they really suppress those aspects of their character. But you can also see that with women. It's not only the man. When you have a culture that doesn't support your traits, it's really difficult to stand up for what you need. And at the same time, your talents won't flourish as much as if you were in a culture that does appreciate all those sensitive strengths.
Because there is still an insufficient understanding by the general public about what sensory processing sensitivity is, HSPs are sometimes mistakenly perceived as and criticized for supposedly being too sensitive and unable to perform at the same high level as others, which is categorically untrue, as you mentioned. How do you recommend HSPs respond to things like that, whether it's coming from family, friends, or work colleagues?
Yeah, it's something that really bugs you when you're highly sensitive. You could say to that friend or colleague, yes, indeed, I do react differently to things than you do, but I have talents that you don't have. You have a different perspective, you have a different way of looking at things. Different is not less. Of course, another strategy is just to send them a link to a blog or to a book that they can read so they know what high sensitivity is about. So, just the education of other people about this trait.
Yeah, education is so important. And yes, regarding books, you can read one of Esther's books. They're available in English as well, and go on her website. There's a lot of English content on there. What three tips would you give to parents raising a highly sensitive child?
Well, being a parent of a highly sensitive child is challenging because perhaps your child doesn't react like you think it should. when you are constantly giving negative feedback on your sensitive child, then it will feel they are not good enough. So, one of the first tips I want to give is really read about this trait and what it entails so that you understand your highly sensitive child. The second tip I want to give is that for a highly sensitive child, the surroundings in which it grows and in which it learns and in which it plays does have a pivotal role. We know that if there are too many changes in the environment, in living conditions, for example, or there are too many harsh words, or when there is no understanding, there's no love, there's no support, they will really show that in their mental and physical health. And they will also show that in the way they grow in school, for example. But when you do give that support, it can change in a couple of months. So when you have a lot of problems with your child, know that seeking for the best conditions will really make a difference. And the last thing I want to say to the parents is let your child know that you will always support it. That's so important for HSPs. Of course, it's important for every child, but a highly sensitive child will really feel if you are connected to it and that you really understands and supports it.
I want to read a beautiful quote from your book. At present, I sometimes have the feeling that only the bass players get the stage, magnificent, but also very loud, shrill, and monotonous. Therefore, I argue in favor of the inclusion of violins, flutes, and pianos in the symphony. The talents of highly sensitive people can contribute to this more balanced interplay. I think that summarizes beautifully the importance and the value and the contributions that HSPs make to the world.
Yeah, definitely. Also, in the animal world, there are researchers that have concluded that we need the highly sensitive animals for a good group functioning and for the survival of the species. So I think that that does go for us humans as well.
Where can people go to find out more about your work?
Well, on my website, of course, but you can also go to Amazon and look for the book The Brain of the Highly Sensitive Person. And it's available in paper and it's available in a Kindle version. So, whatever you like.
Wonderful. And I read your book and I think it's absolutely brilliant. So I encourage everybody else to go and purchase it as well. Esther, thank you so much for having taken the time today.
Thank you, Andrea.